And today I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Robert Browning. And he's a professor of political science and communication at Purdue. He's director of C-SPAN Archives and the C-SPAN Center for Scholarship and Engagement. His undergraduate work was at Marquette, graduate work at University of Wisconsin, and it says Madison, but to me, I don't need to say that. I know where the bar is. It's in the Union at Madison. Dr. Browning teaches Purdue courses on U.S. Congress and media and politics. Specializations include American politics and public policy, public administration. He serves as the director of the C-SPAN Archives and continues to direct campus research and educational access to C-SPAN collections. His current research focuses on floor behavior in Congress. We might talk about that a little bit. And the comparison of broadcast and cable coverage of public affairs. With that, I'm going to let him explain what all that means and share his perspective maybe on what I call the Trump-Pelosi feud. Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much. I need to use this? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've been here before. My first landlord when I came to Purdue 40 years ago was Bert Parker.
Well, sure. Sure.
Good old part.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I remember him well.
Yeah.
And I have some handouts here, not really handouts, but takeaways, some gifts from C-SPAN. One is just a brochure about C-SPAN, and since I work with them so much, we try to promote what they do. And also some what we call fact cards of the presidents. So you have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or want to learn the presidents. It doesn't have the latest president in there, but that's why we're getting rid of them, because we got extras and we haven't reprinted them yet. So, as Dan says, I'm a professor of political science and communication, director of Purdue Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement, and the executive director of C-SPAN Archives. In all my capacities, I watch the media and politics. In my last capacity, I worked for C-SPAN, a media company. This has earned me the moniker of one of my fellows where I exercise as an enemy of the people. But let me assure you that C-SPAN has never appeared on President Trump's radar. He watches Fox and tweets about it. He appears on C-SPAN a lot in his speeches and rallies, and his Make America Great rallies. But he's never been interviewed by C-SPAN. And for those of you who know C-SPAN as an impartial, unbiased, even-handed coverage, it's far from the enemy of the people. But that brings us to my topic for today's remarks. How did we get to this point where Trump is constantly campaigning against the media?
Yeah.
He's far from the first president to have issues with the media, but he's the most recent and perhaps the most consistent. Why don't we just show Trump here a minute? We got some video.
It happened a few days ago, and
They're hundreds of miles away. They're hundreds and hundreds of
you know
miles
what?
away. That's
I
not
think
an
you should-
invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings.
Let me ask
much
you,
better.
if I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's
Mr.
enough.
President, I
That's
can
enough.
ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President.
That's enough.
Mr. President, I have one other
Peter,
question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have?
I'm not concerned about anything with
You may
the
have
Russian
indictments coming down.
investigation because it's a hoax.
Are you-
That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation? Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his
Well, I'm not a big fan of yours either, so.
I understand.
To be honest.
So let me ask you a question if I can. You repeatedly
You aren't the best.
Mr. President, you repeatedly, over the course of
Okay,
the...
just sit down, please. But when you report fake news, no, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
Mr. President, over the course of the last several days of the campaign, sir, at the end of the campaign, you repeatedly said that...
So why do we see this? First, it works. There's enough people in the Republican base who think that they can't trust the media because it's too liberal. So what Trump does, he stirs up his base. Second, it's not new with Republican presidents. Third, Trump has elevated it to a more visceral level, although if you look back to conventions as early as 1964, you can see delegates boo and shake their fists at media booths. So let me give you some examples. Nixon, 1962. All right, turn it up as high as you can.
Years, ever since the Gist case, you've had a lot of fun. A lot of fun. That you've had an opportunity to attack me, and I think I've given as good as I've taken. I leave you gentlemen now, and you will now write it, you will interpret it, that's your right. But as I leave you, I want you to know just think how much you're going to be missing. You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore. Because, gentlemen, this is my last press conference, and I hope that what I have said today will at least make television, radio, the press recognize that they have a right and a responsibility if they're against a candidate, give him the shot, but also recognize if they give him the shot, put one lonely reporter on the campaign who will report what the candidate says now and then. Thank you, gentlemen. Good day.
So you can see nothing new there. It wasn't his last press conference. It was a great comeback by Nixon to become president after his defeat in 1960, of course, and by President Kennedy, and then in 1962, which is when that was at the gubernatorial race in California, where he said after he couldn't win that, everyone thought he was finished. So in 1964, Eisenhower, who we wouldn't expect, appeared at the Coldwater Convention, and he turns and shakes his fist at the media booths, calling them sensation-seeking columnists and commentators. So again, this theme early on that you can't trust the media. In Nixon in office, he had Agnew give he was against the instant commentary, which is funny today when we see how much the news media immediately talks about everything. But in 1968, Nixon would give a speech in 1970, and the media would come on afterwards to give their interpretation. That was called instant commentary. And he objected to that. And at that point, there were only 3 networks and PBS. And the 24-hour news cycle we have today didn't exist. Agnew called them the nattering nabobs of negativism. Reagan took somewhat of a high road, attempting to communicate directly with the people. He would go over the heads of the media, doing presidential travel and speeches around the country. And then Trump, in our video library, we've had him saying fake news 63 times. Mostly in speeches, he gets boos and applause when he criticizes the media. So that's what I mean it works. To quote a few of his lines, one of the evening shows that are ridiculous, how horrible they are, how horrible. I watched them by mistake. Just a couple of things, because I knew the fake news likes to say it. During the campaign, I would say, Mexico is going to pay for it. Obviously, I never said this, and I never meant they were going to write out a check. I said they were going to pay for it, and they are. They're paying for it through the incredible deal we have with the United States, Mexico, and Canada. It's a trade deal. Because your question is a very political question, because you have an agenda, you're CNN, you're fake news, you have an agenda. So how did we get to this point? There's always been a conservative criticism of the liberal media, centered in New York, 3 networks, New York Times, the Washington Post in Washington, Newsweek owned by the Washington Post, and Nixon loved to hate them because he felt he didn't get a fair shake. As we said, Nixon in 1968 had a careful campaign of town halls that were scripted, where they invited the public in, and he didn't mix it up much with the public. Reagan was much more comfortable as a public speaker. With Mike Deaver calling the shots, they would travel on one-day trips, get good audiences, make public speeches. His dealing with the press was not that good, but the press pointing out mistakes, but he brushed them off. He had an expression that it didn't really matter what he said. It's the picture, stupid. As long as he was seen on television, it gave a good impression, and that's what people remembered, him being presidential. Trump uses the press as a foil. He loves his rallies, he has sympathetic crowds, and he used the media to get boos and applause. Meanwhile, the press has changed. The Reagan administration abolished something called the Fairness Doctrine that required television and radio broadcasts to get both sides of an issue. It gave rise to Rush Limbaugh and other conservative talk radio. Before, radio couldn't have a single opinion like it does today, and television couldn't either. These are the voices that sort of fed the beast. They were strong, vocal, critical of the liberal media. Liberals lost on this playing field. Senator Al Franken, when he was in Minnesota, tried to start a progressive radio station, and he wasn't successful. Now, the conservatives say liberals have a radio station. What's that called? NPR. They criticize that and say that's the liberal radio station. Within the environment changed with the cable satellite revolution. It brought CNN, the 24-hour news, MSNBC, and the liberal voice, and then Fox News Channel. We should pause to say something about this cable satellite revolution because it's so important. Brian Lamb, who founded C-SPAN, was both a player and a beneficiary. He worked in the Nixon office of telecommunication policy, which was an innovative place that pushed for changes in communication. They had about 6 things they pushed for. One was called BUN, break up the networks. They wanted more voices. They also wanted to break up AT&T. That was really early to AT&T. That was 1974, and AT&T didn't get broken up for another 10 years. But they recognized that monopoly that it had over communication. They wanted to abolish the Fairness Doctrine. That didn't happen until 1981 with Reagan. They wanted to limit PBS funding. They also wanted to deregulate cable. Cable was heavily regulated at that time and limited. And finally, the most importantly, they wanted to privatize satellites. It was these last 2 that created the information revolution, which is as important as the internet today. Because at the time there were only 3 networks plus PBS. AT&T and ComSat, you might remember, wanted to control satellites. They wanted to limit and have the government limit who can use a satellite. And the Nixon people wanted more voices. They argued that satellites should be private, that anyone who wanted to could rent time on a satellite and create information. This has brought about an important revolution in satellites. And Brian was one of the beneficiaries of that because he created C-SPAN, which was not possible in the broadcast world because there was a limited number of stations. But in the satellite world, you could buy time on a satellite and create a television network. And cable, which wanted content, took the content from C-SPAN, from CNN, from MTV, and created an industry that grew. And of course, then that brought CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News Channel on cable. So, how did we get to where we are now? Extreme shows on cable build an audience. Some of you remember Crossfire, which really started the game. The McLaughlin Group, which was a shouting talk show. Newt Gingrich and his followers called the elected Republicans to create a new agenda of Republican ideas front and center. They used C-SPAN in the early days to give speeches, and by 1994, they took control of the House for the first time in 40 years. That was revolutionary, in a sense, and built a conservative agenda. The Democrats responded by moving to the left. The Democratic primary and this favors splinter groups and supports liberal candidates. By the time they moved to the center for the general election, they are already defined by the Republican opponent. You can certainly see that now. All the Democrats that are coming out, Bloomberg says he's not going to run. The Democrats coming out are conservative. Very liberal. They're being criticized as socialist and being defined by the Republicans. Trump took the center stage to make America great again. It appealed to large groups of Republicans and independent voters. The media became left and right. Politics is polarized with a little room for compromise in the middle. So what's the future? Right now, the Democrats are moving left, both in Congress and with their presidential candidates. Trump is firmly planted on the right and using his rallies to shore up his popular base. The media have no trouble finding left and right spokespersons for their voices on the talk shows. Democrats can't believe they lost the election to Donald Trump. The current climate is to present another Sanders or Harris candidate who offers an alternative to Trump. So in this climate, there doesn't seem to be much of appetite or room for a process or central candidate. So I'm sorry to be so pessimistic, but the extremes control the process right now, and there's little room for the center. So let me pause there and take any questions that you have. I'm sure this is a topic that you all think about. Yes?
I was just saying, when I was a kid, my father used to say that the thing that was good about the United States is that we always were changing. The pendulum always comes swinging back. I don't imagine in the next 5-6 years we're going to move from where we are right now, but that pendulum hopefully might.
Yes, it will. It's really hard to look at this 2020 election yet to see if there's going to be an alternative to Trump. And so then how do the Republicans lose to a Democratic candidate unless it's perhaps Joe Biden, who's the most centrist of all the candidates, and he's making some moves to suggest that he might run. But on the other hand, he's going to be labeled as yesterday's goods, and and there's a certain appeal that Trump has in his policies that are still popular. But I think eventually there'll be some self-correcting mechanism. Yes. Another question? Yes. Bill.
Just a technical question. Out of curiosity, I remember you guys standing in C-SPAN there after row of video cassettes. Now, have all those been transferred some way, or
Yes.
How do you assemble the news, so to speak?
Yeah, I'll repeat that.
I'm sorry.
He asked about the C-SPAN collection that Bill remembers from campus, where we had rows and rows of videotape. We still have rows and rows of videotape because, as an archivist, we never want to throw anything away. We always worry that something in there that we missed and we have to go back to the videotape, and we do. And occasionally, because we digitized everything, but we digitized it fast, and so sometimes we have to go back because of a mistake. So it's all on servers. It's all available. There's 253,000 hours. That's a lot. You can't possibly, although I tell the students, this was a heroic undertaking to start what I did, which was start the archive for C-SPAN. And to record everything, what we do is we take everything off the satellite every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on 3 networks. We index it So you can go and search for any name you want, or any topic, or any organization. You can see Mitch Daniels throughout the years. We used to always say Mitch lost his hair, but Joe Biden gained his. So anyway, and it's all available online, free. So what's your next question?
And what would be the website or whatever you call it?
cspan.org. Just cspan.org. But you know, in your era, we had all that Russian television.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
we had the change of the collapse of the Soviet Union. We brought in that Russian telecast almost every night.
Is that still on?
Yeah, and that's still available.
Oh, for goodness.
So the period, and historians are starting to pay attention now. We just brought in a historian from the University of Virginia as a visiting scholar, and she's studied conservative media, and she's just amazed at what's in there. And so historians are starting to pay attention to video because it tells the story, and there's a lot of things that are not available in print.
I think you're the only establishment that does this, right?
Oh, yes, that we are. We are. There was, the Vanderbilt University started an archive in 1968 of the evening news, ABC, CBS, NBC. And they got sued by CBS, and CBS said they owned the airwaves, and they couldn't do that. And you imagine a suit to the university, it's kind of a chilling effect from a big organization like CBS. But all things are political, and so Howard Baker, who was the senator for Tennessee, fixed the law to say that universities and libraries could take the evening news and record it, and they could loan it out like loan videotapes. Today, they have a little bit of a problem because they're digital, and the law doesn't say you can. Some people want to say that if you watch something online, it's borrowing it. But the law doesn't say that, so they're being very cautious about whether they let their collection be viewed online. But no other network does this. Yes?
Do you honestly see any chance for change to Central at all? Centers? Can we elect Dick Lugar again?
No, I mean, look what happened to Lugar. He got knocked out in the primary by a very conservative. And then Donnelly was more centrist. He lost. And watch for any centrist candidate in the Democratic Party to announce, and they're not there. They'll come back to the center, but by the time they come back to the center, the opponents have labeled them so much that they can't get rid of those labels. But on the other hand, if they can paint Donald Trump as extreme, and the Electoral College is a tough animal. It's tough for the Democrats to win, and Hillary Clinton thought she had a route and it had it locked down, and Trump only had a few ways to win, but he did win, and he's still strong in those states. So we'll see. I'm not optimistic right now. If I had to predict, I'd say we'd probably have another 4 years of Trump, and then after that, people will look for a change. I mean, the people, Trump, Perot, we always have this kind of love with the outsiders. Yes.
Do you think the Electoral College should be eliminated?
No, because I'm a real traditionalist. Don't like to fool with the Constitution. There is a movement to say that it should be voted proportionally, that they should vote by congressional districts, which would do away with the winner take all, and that's feasible. Maine does that. They only have 4 electoral votes. Actually, maybe 2 electoral votes, and they vote them by congressional districts. So there's a movement to do that, and that could pick up, particularly if we keep seeing this disconnect between the popular vote and the Electoral College vote. Yes?
I have a question. How many of these news commentators consider themselves
really news commentators or entertainers. Because I read an early autobiography by Rush Limbaugh, and at that time he said he considered himself more of an entertainer than as a news commentator. What do you think about that?
Well, it's all about the ratings, and it's all about salary. And the ratings, Limbaugh gets paid large sums of money to be on. And so getting a following is so important. And it's, unfortunately, that's sort of what the commercial media begets. That's why Brian Lamb had a vision to create C-SPAN, and he wanted it to be different. And in 40 years now, when C-SPAN's been on the air, he's never said his name. He says, it's not about me. It's not about the Brian Lamb show like the Larry King show. And when C-SPAN interviews somebody, they focus right on the guest first, and they don't label they don't allow the commentator to say, this is who I am, I'm important, you're important. But that, C-SPAN doesn't have to make any money because it's a nonprofit. Those that make money have to have talent, have to have the personalities, and it's all about those personalities. Yes?
If we ever had a situation where the relationship between the news broadcasting company and the president had been as close as Trump and Fox?
No, I think this is the most extreme we've ever had. Oh, you're saying close. You're saying close.
Well, several people
I see
from
what you mean.
several people from Fox are already in the administration.
Yeah. They've often hired people from the administration to run Voice of America, for example. That's been common. But I don't think, we haven't had, Fox is only like 1985. We've only had this extreme media for this short period of time. So I don't think we've had such a close relationship as we have today. Now, if you notice yesterday they said that the Democrats didn't think that Fox was unbiased enough to host one of their debates. So that shows you how both parties look upon that network.
One more question.
Yes.
All of your examples had to do with conservatives criticizing the media. Why do you think the Democrats don't criticize the media?
I know that. I thought of that, and I almost put it in a line. What about the Democrats? Because they've not been criticized as much. I mean, they are on certain policies, but it kind of washes off, and it's more the conservatives that feel that the media are liberal, and that's always been the moniker.
Can people audit your class?
Sure.
It's interesting, it really is.
Well, I appreciate so much being here. It's great. It's funny when you go down to campus, I ask the students what they watch. It's all Netflix. There's not very much on television. You all know that from your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And so it's that next generation that we've got to sort of, and maybe that's where the centrist will come.
Thank you.